Hello and welcome to Cuppa with a Scientist, a brand new podcast by Loughborough University that will interview a different scientist each week about their academic journey to the top. We will discuss how they went from a confused teenager choosing A-level subjects to a leader in their field, with plenty of weird and wonderful stories in between and golden nuggets of advice for those aspiring to get into science. As well as keeping your ears and brain entertained, we hope this podcast will dispel the myth that all scientists wear white lab coats and give you an insight into how vast the world of science really is. And because the makers of this show are painfully British, we'll be doing it all over a good cuppa. So stick the kettle on and settle in. I'm Meg, and I'm a PR and Communications Officer at Loughborough University, and I'm also an aspiring scientist. Last year, I made a tough decision to return to university and pursue my love of biology. I found podcasts to be really helpful when making this decision, although slightly field specific, so one dedicated to physics or another dedicated to marine biology. From health sciences to social sciences, we're going to cover it all in this podcast and show you how vast science really is. And hopefully you'll pick up a few tips and tricks along the way to help you on your journey to becoming a scientist. Joining us for today's episode is Professor Amanda Daley, a Professor of Behavioural Medicine in the University's School of Sport, Exercise and Health Sciences. Her work is focused on investigating the effects of lifestyle interventions on health outcomes. She made headlines last year after she published research on labelling food and drinks with the amount and type of physical activity needed to burn off the calories in them. The research suggests it might be a more effective way of encouraging people to make healthier dietary choices. Amanda is also the chief investigator on several ongoing trials that are examining the effectiveness of community and general practice-based physical activity and weight management interventions. And she is also examining the role of standing desks during GP consultations. But more on all of that later. Hi Amanda, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you. First of all, the important question, what mug have you gone for and why?
Oh, so I've got my Brummy Bird. I don't know if you can see that, but hopefully you can. My Brummy Bird mug, because I am a Brummy Bird. I was born and raised in Birmingham and I still live there. So it felt appropriate to come and have my Brummy Bird mug today.
Fabulous, representing. I've gone for, on the animal theme, I suppose. It's a little seal. Not the easiest to drink out of, but it's pretty cute. So
No, we don't want to tip any.
No. And we asked you to bring an artefact with you connected to your work. What have you gone for?
So I've brought a chocolate lion bar. And the main reason for that is that a lot of my work is based around diet, physical activity and weight management. So it felt appropriate to bring some chocolate and talk about that. The other key thing about this particular Lion bar is that it tells you how many calories are in the actual Lion bar, but also how much dancing you would have to do in order to burn off the calories in the Lion bar. And that's, again, one of my particular kind of scientific interests, is different ways of presenting information to the public to help them make decisions about what to eat and buy. So that was the main reason, I guess.
And out of curiosity, how much dancing would I have to do?
Out of curiosity, I can answer that question. So you will have to do 25 minutes of dancing in order to burn off 207 calories in the Lion bar. So you have to decide whether the Lion bar is worth the calories.
Alrighty, well, let's get stuck into it then. So you're a Professor of Behavioural Medicine. Can you explain what that means and what it entails, please?
Yeah, it's quite a fancy title, isn't it? Effectively, I'm a professor, so I do a lot of my work around research. I do a little bit of teaching, but I mostly do research and enterprise. So I'm mostly interested in why the public make the decisions that they do around their physical activity and their weight and the things that they eat. And we're quite fortunate in that we get a lot of funding from the Department of Health and Social Care, who recognise the importance of science around physical activity, weight management, lifestyle. So we develop a lot of studies that are trying to answer important questions to help the public make good decisions about the way in which they live their lives.
Okay. So you kind of touched on you get funding because this is such an important area of study. On kind of a national and global scale, why is it of such importance?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons, really. I mean, lots of people die. I mean, thousands of people die every year because they're not doing enough physical activity, or they're not eating the right kinds of foods, or they're eating too much food. I mean, most of the population are overweight. So it's really critical to think of ways in which we can help people, because we could actually prevent, tens of thousands of lives being lost through making changes to the way in which we live our lives. So for that reason, it's pretty critical. The other thing is that lifestyle behaviours cost the NHS, millions of pounds every year in treatment, and that money could be better spent on other things if we could avoid some of the consequences of, eating too much food and not doing enough physical activity.
So before we get stuck into more specifics on your research, should you go to an event or a dinner party, you tell people your job title, do you find there's any misconceptions around what they think you do? Or do they ask you any particular questions that, just aren't related to your work?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked lots of time, like you've asked me today, what is a professor of behavioural medicine? That's probably my most frequently asked question. But I think the key thing is that we're not like the Nutty Professor off the film show. I mean, clearly I'm from the Nutty Professor. The movie, The Nutty Professor?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's lots of people's kind of view of what a professor does and will look like. And I guess the other thing is that lots of people think that professors are, these mad scientists sat in a tower with big fuzzy hair trying to work out, complicated experiments. And again, I'm not that kind of nutty professor. So that's, I guess, some of the views that people have around the professor. We're just normal people.
Cool. So, like I said, we'll discuss the applications of your research a bit later. But for me, I always find it interesting just taking it back a little bit. So I can't imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, that when you were younger, you were aspiring to become a professor of behavioural medicine. What did you want to do when you were younger?
That's a good question, Meg. I think I would have liked to have been a kind of professional athlete. I'm a really keen runner, so that would have been amazing to be able to do that, but I just wasn't good enough. So the other thing I think I would have liked to have been is an MP. I don't think at the moment wanting to be an MP given the situation that we find ourselves in, but I think that would have been a really rewarding and challenging type of occupation. I'm quite interested in politics, spend a lot of my sort of spare time thinking and about politics. So I think an MP, I would have probably done all right at that, but my calling was elsewhere, and so that's okay.
So let's talk about the calling. How did you, saying you were interested in running in politics, how have we gone from GCSE, A-levels and fallen into behavioural medicine? Can you tell us a bit more about your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in the body and the movement of the body, and I've always been interested in the brain. So I guess the kind of behavioural medicine is about the combination of those two disciplines to try and work out what might be a good solution for helping people live healthy lives. I mean, for me, I just kind of fell into it, I guess, and I'm not sure I even knew what behavioural medicine was, so it's quite ironic that I should end up here, but I guess I just knew that I was interested in the brain, I was interested in the body, and this was a perfect way in which to carve out a career, if you like, sort of putting those two things together. So
what A-levels did you select, and then kind of how did you make a decision as to what to study at university?
So I was interested in lots of different things. I mean, I did actually more arts-based A-levels. I actually can't remember what they were now. It was such a long time ago, but I remember they were arts-based. And, I think for me, it was much more around doing A-levels that I was interested in than the actual career. I think the career came much later in terms of working out what it is that I wanted to do. In actual fact, a lot of my kind of friends are scientists, and they've talked about a similar path, that we don't always know that's the path that we're going to take. We often fall into it and then find that that's something that interests us.
That's really interesting. So you did arts-based kind of A-levels. What did you do at university, and where did you do that at? So
I went to Bangor in North Wales, which a long way from home, and my PhD was in health psychology, because I kind of realised that I was interested in, again, the mind and the body. So that was kind of my calling, really, and Bangor was a good place for those types of topics.
Obviously, we've just gone from kind of A-level to, PhD. What kind of fun stories and standout moments have you got in that journey? Because I'm curious to know how, you all of a sudden something clicked that it was the sciences that you wanted to go into.
I mean, I've done lots of fun things. I can tell you about some fun things that I've done as a scientist. So a few years ago now, I got a call to ask me if I would do a workshop about dance and physical activity with Darcy Bussell, off dancing. So I was like, well, I've got 2 left feet. I know nothing about dancing. I know very little about children other than being a mother. But anyway, so I agreed to do this workshop with Darcy Bussell, who I'd never met. My daughter's quite a keen dancer. So off I go to Covent Garden, and I just rock up. I meet Darcy Bussell, international superstar, to go and do a workshop about physical activity and children's health in London. And we just kind of hop on the tube at Covent Garden as if we'd known each other our whole lives. We spend the day together. We do this workshop. We go for a glass of wine at the end of the day. And I'm sort of sat on the train on the way back and thinking, gosh, isn't that a really fun thing to do? But it's kind of weird too that as a scientist, I'm sat in a bar in Covent Garden with Darcy Bussell, international superstar. So you don't plan on those things as a scientist, but lots of things can come your way that you never think are going to happen. So that was pretty cool. I think that was pretty cool anyway.
That is a very cool, an unusual story. So can we talk about some of your other kind of career highs that you've had? It doesn't necessarily have to be as a professor, but during field work or as you were getting into this kind of industry, what other standout moments have there been for you?
I think getting your first grant is always really satisfying. My first grant was from Cancer Research UK, and it was to look at how we could encourage women recovering from breast cancer could be more active to try and aid their recovery. We've got a lot of evidence now that physical activity is a really good thing to do during chemotherapy, but also in terms of stopping recurrence of cancers. So my study was the first one funded in the UK from Cancer Research UK. So that was hugely rewarding because, it's always nice to get grants, but actually doing your science and your research to really try and help people to make a difference to their lives and hopefully help them to recover is hugely satisfying in terms of making a difference. It's not just research or science for science sake. There's a real purpose. It's got a chance to improve the lives of lots of women who are diagnosed with cancer. So that was really kind of quite special. And yeah, I guess sort of getting my PhD was, if we go back even further, that's obviously always a landmark moment in people's careers. So that was nice. But I think other things like patients in our studies giving you a call or dropping you an email and saying that study that I participated in, really changed my life. It made a difference to how I felt about myself, or now I'm much able to manage my weight. So it can be the little things as well. I think as a scientist, when people come back to you and give you feedback, as well as the big accolades, which are nice. But yeah, I think feedback from patients is really important and rewarding.
I can imagine. So just quick question before I go to the next one. What did you do your undergrad in?
Sports science.
Sports science, okay. So for the next question, obviously we've spoke about some of the highs. Just want to see if there's been any struggles for you going through this kind of academic journey. I don't know if it was the same for you, but I found at university, I'm doing biology at the moment. There's not many females on my course. It's got better, I think, but it's still, there's a handful of us doing kind of what people class as a hard science. Did you find that? Is that one of the things that you encountered?
Not particularly. I don't think it's something that sort of got in my way. I mean, I think, you know, science generally does have a kind of aura around it, that it's something that men do and it isn't something that women do. But, you know, we know women are just as good at science as men, so it's not something that I particularly had a problem with. And I think lots of the people that I work with have always been very supportive of women. I've always found men very supportive of my career. So yeah, it's not something I've particularly had a problem with, but I know, you know, that's not the case for all women. I think there are lots of women who have faced barriers to being, you know, good scientists because of kind of the prevailing views around what science is. But, you know, I think things are changing. I think hopefully, Meg, by the time you finish, you might take a few more steps towards equality in science.
So okay, that's not really something that you face, which is great to hear. Have there ever been any kind of things that you wish you'd been given a heads up about getting into the science industry? So I know you kind of touched on grants, you know, like grant rejections or stuff like that, you know, kind of not so glamorous bits that people don't really tell you about.
I think knowing what rejection can do, it's not great to spend 5 years on developing something and for it not to go well. I think some advice potentially around, you know, there will be highs and there will be lows in science, and you have to kind of take the rough with the smooth. I think being prepared for that would have been good, I think, in terms of not taking things quite so personally when you get the rejections. I think the other thing in science potentially is it can be quite a lonely place. You do spend quite a lot of time working on your own, but equally there are periods where you spend, you know, big periods of time with others. I mean, certainly in the research that I do, because it's very NHS and health based, it is very team based. But even within that, I think you have to be prepared to, you know, spend, you know, quite some time on your own, thinking things, writing, developing ideas. I think it would have been useful to know that. I'm quite a sociable person, so sort of I'm not so keen on spending lots of time on my own. So yeah, I think that would be it.
That's a useful bit of insight. So you're at Loughborough now. When did you join Loughborough University?
So I joined Loughborough in January 2018. So that's about 2.5 years ago. So prior to that, I was at the University of Birmingham, and I was there for around 15 or 16 years, and I was in the Department of Primary Care and General Practice, because most of my research is based around GPs, NHS contexts. So yeah, so that's where I was based.
So now you've been at Loughborough for a couple of years now. So what does your day-to-day / typical month look like?
Well, I mean, a typical day, no, there is no typical day, but, you know, every day is different. So I currently sort of split my time between Loughborough and Birmingham, mainly because most of the GPs and the hospitals and the NHS trusts that I do my research in are based in Birmingham, and I also live in Birmingham. So yeah, I probably spend a couple of days working in Birmingham, and then the rest of the week working in Loughborough. And then when I'm in Loughborough, again, lots of meetings, but, you know, no day is exactly the same. Every day is different, which I think is one of the good things about, you know, often in science, you know, not everything is regimented. There's lots of variety and lots of different things to do.
And how have you found working during the pandemic and the lockdown? Has that had much of an impact on your work?
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of it is NHS based, obviously a lot of the resources has been diverted to dealing with COVID, and rightly so. So a lot of our studies had to pause, but we're back open now, and all our studies are up and running again. And in many ways, I think the pandemic has highlighted even more the importance of our work. You know, we know that there's a link between COVID and obesity, and there's kind of new that is going on in that area. So, you know, my work in terms of weight management, physical activity is even more important now than it ever was before.
You've kind of touched on it already, that it's very varied, the work that you do. does that also involve like travel and being isn't in a hospital working, stuff outside of the office? Is there kind of options to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite fortunate. I have spent a lot of time traveling, and there are lots of opportunities to do that, mainly to connect with other scientists around the world. I mean, I know at the moment a lot of connections are done via Skype or Zoom or whatever, but prior to COVID-19, there was a big emphasis on collaboration. So I've been to China a few times. I've been to Canada. I was due to go to Australia 3 times this year. Obviously, those have been cancelled because I can't go. Canada, Serbia. So some sort of obvious places, but also some less obvious places as well. New Zealand. Scotland.
Proper variety there, from Serbia to Scotland. I like it. Yeah. So let's talk a bit more about your research. So can you tell us about PACE, please, and what PACE stands for?
Yeah, so PACE is a form of labelling of food. So at the moment, most food is typically labelled with what we call the traffic light labelling system. And PACE is a system of labelling that refers to putting on food the amount of physical activity that's required to burn the calories in the food. So PACE is actually an acronym, and it stands for Physical Activity Calorie Equivalent Labelling, so hence PACE. So it's just about allowing the public to make a decision about whether they're going to eat or consume or purchase a food based on the amount of physical activity that it will take to expend the calories in that food. So to put into context, we all like a chocolate digestive, don't we, Meg? So one digestive is about 80 calories. So that will take you about 8 minutes to burn. So 2 is about 16 minutes. When I say minutes, I mean running. So if you eat 3 or 4 chocolate digestives, you can easily see how the miles and the minutes start to mount up in terms of the amount of physical activity that's required. And what we found is that the public don't always fully understand and appreciate how much physical activity it's going to take them to expend the calories in the food that they've consumed. And we found that that's a big factor in why the public overeat, because they're not always aware of the energy in the foods that they're consuming. So we'd like the government to have a look at this and to change the way in which food is labelled and put this information on. So when you go into a restaurant and you see that chocolate cake's going to take you, 1 hour and 10 minutes to burn in running, then you might think again about eating that cake, or you might decide to share it. But either way, you're going to potentially reduce the amount of calories that you eat.
I know when we, I think it was our team, published a press release on your kind of research in this area, I think it was last year, it got a bit of mixed feedback. So, and I think it's a problem with this kind of research area as a whole, that it does divide opinions. Some people saying, yes, we understand obesity is an issue, but then other people having concerns about it, and eating disorders and what that does. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think overall, if you ask the public, they've said that we want PACE labelling because we find it easier to understand. I understand that if I eat this chocolate cake, it's going to take me an hour. It's much harder for me to understand all the information on labels or the traffic light because it's not so clear. So we know that the public would prefer the PACE type of labelling. And I think, we don't have any evidence that calorie labelling, or certainly PACE labelling, leads to eating disorders. And actually the evidence is quite contrary to that. So that's one thing to consider. Having said that, clearly eating disorders are a real concern. I'm not for one moment suggesting that it's important, but if we put it in context to the amount of people that are overweight or obese worldwide and the number of people that have an eating disorder, the number that are overweight and obese, massively dwarfs the number of people that have eating disorders. And my job is to save as many lives as I can through the work that we do, the science and the research. And so I have to focus on that. So what I would like to see potentially is more kind of money going into supporting and helping people with eating disorders. But I don't think that means that we forget the 60-70% of people who are overweight, who are in themselves, much more likely to die of diseases. We've got a responsibility to all those people too. I think I accept and recognise that eating disorders is important, but I also accept that lots of people are dying of cancer, cardiovascular disease, of strokes, heart attacks, mental health, and all those things could be avoided by having regular physical activity and a good diet.
So how do you handle when people do criticise your research and your findings? Because I think I personally would really struggle with it, but you've just given a fantastic answer. So have you got any tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think my tip to myself is not to get embroiled in arguments on Twitter, because that never ends well. I think as a scientist, we need to, let the evidence do the talking. We've heard that a lot, haven't we, during the pandemic, led by the science. And I think if you're doing good science and you know that the work that you're doing is excellent, high quality, you can stand in front of that and know that what you're doing is right in that sense. I think in terms of tips, not to take it personally. The people that are criticising you don't know you personally. They're criticising potentially the work, and they're not necessarily criticising you, although it doesn't always feel like that. Sometimes you feel like, gosh, have I done this wrong? Have I made a mistake? And you start to sort of think, is this about me? And of course it's not, because they don't know you. But my strong advice is not to get argumentative on Twitter, because and often when people criticise, it's just a few lone voices. It's not that all 66 million people in the UK are criticising you. It might just be a handful of people, and actually they're just a few, as I say, just a few lone voices. So I think it's important to put it in perspective. Again, I'm not suggesting you ignore those criticisms. Those criticisms might be entirely just, but you've got to be led by the science.
I think that's some really good advice. Perspective and turn off Twitter for the day.
Yeah.
So you're also the chief investigator on several other ongoing trials. Could you tell us a bit more about those and what kind of they involve?
So most of the trials that we do are, as I say, based around physical activity and weight management. And I think there's probably too many to talk about all of them now, but I can sort of talk about a couple of them. So one of the studies or the programs of work that we're doing is around getting GPs to stand during consultations. So the idea is that we need to think about the health of GPs who spend a large amount of their time sitting during the day. But also we want GPs to have more conversations with patients when they come to visit them routinely about standing, about sitting less, about taking more physical activity. And we think by having the GP standing potentially, that might start some more conversations around changing health behaviours, but also thinking about the health of GPs who often neglect their own health. They're so busy dealing with everybody else's health, they forget that actually it's really important for them to stand, to move around and to keep active. So that's kind of one programme of work that we're doing, and we're doing that in conjunction with the Royal College of GPs, who represent GPs, who have also kind of acknowledged that it's important to think about the health and well-being of their member GPs as well. And in terms of weight, one of the trials that we're about to start is called Just One. And Just One is about just getting the public to reduce their calorie intake by just 100 calories and increasing their step counts per day by just 1,000. And the reason why we're doing that study is because everyone thinks that obesity is caused by, massive overeating and gluttony, and it's not true. At a population level, obesity is caused, if you like, by the fact that all of us just overeat a little bit too much every day. So if I can get you to reduce your calorie intake by just a little bit, i.e. just 100, then actually we could make a real difference to levels of obesity in the UK and throughout the world. So we just want people to make small changes. So 100 calories, we go back to the chocolate digestive that I talked about at the start. All we're asking people to do is reduce their calorie intake by one chocolate biscuit a day. And actually over a week, that's 700 calories. And so you can start to see how very small changes can actually make quite a big difference to the amount of calories that you consume in the day. So that's, so that gives you hopefully a flavour that most of the work that we do, I call it kind of, I'm told off for saying this, but it's kind of down the pub science. So if I went to the pub and talked to people and they said, oh, you're a professor of behavioural medicine, what do you do? And I talked to them about the two examples that I've given you, they would get it. They understand. It's, you know, it's something that they can resonate, you know, with. So yeah, I call it down the pub science, but apparently it's not good. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's really important that we do work that the public understand and can connect with, because ultimately it's about them.
Yeah, I like accessible science where everybody will get it, and I think it's easier as well then to kind of convey the importance of such research when people understand why you do it. So we've kind of touched on a little bit earlier that you've engaged with media work quite a bit around your research. When you became a scientist, is this something that you expected to be doing, interviews and talking in this public sphere, and how do you find it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, we, as scientists or academic scientists in universities, we don't ordinarily get any kind of media training. So you have to kind of learn it on the hoof, as it were. And it does get better and easier as you go along. And no, I didn't know that I would be doing, and as it happens, I do quite a lot of media work, and it can be quite nerve-wracking. I remember just before Christmas I did a live Sky broadcast worldwide, and I remember thinking to myself, Amanda, do not mess this up. This is going out live all over the world, and if I get this wrong, you know, this will be not good for my career. But I managed to nail it, but it's quite nerve-wracking because, you know, it's a pretty big deal. So I think I wasn't expecting it. I think because of the nature of the work that we do, I do find that the media are really interested in the work that we do. So, and that's good and bad. It means that we get good coverage, we get good interest. And also I think it goes back to the point I made earlier about, as a scientist, you want it to be applicable to the people that you serve. And the people that we serve are the public. So, you know, we need to make the media work for us in the same way that we might help the media too.
So what keeps you driven and so motivated, and, you know, kind of the things that inspired you to get into science, do they still inspire you now?
I mean, I think, you know, I feel hugely privileged to be in a position to be able to save lives through research. I think that's the thing that gets me out of bed every day. You know, the science that we do can make a real difference to the lives of, you know, not just people in the UK, but worldwide. So, you know, obviously we do our research in the UK, but a lot of the things that we do would be applicable throughout the world. So that's hugely rewarding to make a difference. I mean, just to go back to one of your earlier questions, you know, about what is a, you know, professor of behavioural medicine. So one of my particular remits is to try and help other scientists develop careers in science, if you like. So capacity building, mentoring early career researchers and students to think about a career in science. So that's really rewarding when you see the students that you've mentored, you know, do really well or develop their own themes of research or programs of research because of their working with you, or you've made a difference to how they kind of see their work. So we've just developed a new research centre at Loughborough called CLIMB, and CLIMB stands for the Centre for Lifestyle Medicine and Behaviour. And as part of CLIMB, we're particularly looking to do that mentorship process to make sure that, you know, when I retire in a few years' time, I leave a legacy of, you know, really well-grounded scientists who can carry on some of the work that, you know, I've been doing. I'm not about to retire, by the way. Work that I've been doing. But I think it is important to leave a legacy, to leave, you know, highly skilled, highly trained scientists, because, you know, the fight against obesity is going to take a long time, and so we need to have people in place that can, you know, carry that work on.
And we've just spoken a lot about kind of the the really good things about your role, what would you say is your least favourite bit?
My least favourite bit, I suppose, so we talked about travel and all the great places that I've been to, but I've got a young family, so, being away from home is nice, but also I try and, limit it as well. So being away from home for a lot can be quite challenging. That would probably be the main answer, I think. Nothing else sort of springs to mind.
Admin gets mentioned to me a lot of admin.
Well, I'm quite fortunate. I've got a PA that does a lot of that stuff for me, but that is a headache for sure. And certainly, obviously, in your early career, you may not have a PA that kind of organises your day for you. But admin can be very time consuming, and I'm not very good at admin, so that's definitely left to other people. Long days. I think long days, can be tricky, and it can be quite tiring. Again, I sort of talked about working on your own quite a bit. So if you're tired and working on your own, that's not great. But I think overall, there's definitely more highs than lows. I think for those people who are interested in an academic career in science, I think it's a good career. There's lots of flexibility, lots of opportunities to do different things. So it's not just about sort of being in your office and beavering away, if you like. I've sort of also talked about some of the other opportunities that have come my way, the media stuff, the Sky, Channel 4, meeting Darcy Bussell at Covent Garden. It's kind of lots of things can come your way, and I think it's important to think about science in its broadest sense, not just that nutty professor from the film.
And you've done so much already, but what is your kind of ultimate goal in your career?
I think to save as many lives as we can, I think, through the research that we do, make a difference to people's lives. I don't think we'll always necessarily, know that. And I think leaving a legacy, I think I sort of talked about CLIMB and the new research centre. I think being able to leave that in a good place that's doing, really high class, world class international research would be a good place to be.
It's a good goal. So what does a professor of behavioural medicine do in their free time? Are you still running a lot? I imagine as well that you eat super healthy. So is that true?
Well, I have a sweet tooth like everybody else, but I try and my goal is to only have 1 or 2 biscuits at 10 o'clock. And other than that, I try not to eat any other junk. Unless it's someone's birthday, I try and, I do try and practice what I preach. I think it's important to believe in the mission, if you like, to know that it's hard not to eat junk or to eat crisps and biscuits and treats. So, I do try and set an example, be a good role model. I'm a keen runner still, so I still run 5 times a week when I can. I listen to music. So running's really good for running, but also for listening to music at the same time. So I try and combine the two. Got quite a varied taste in music. So my favourite Radio 4 show is Desert Island Discs, which is obviously music. But equally, I'm quite happy to listen to Trevor Nelson, Rhythm Nation at 10 o'clock on a Monday night. So 2 different types of radio, which is good too.
So we're back. We've got a little refill ready to get into the second part of the questions. So we've touched on your kind of research projects that are ongoing. Looking forward a bit, what would you say is next for you? Is there any kind of topics you really want to get stuck into in the near future?
I think one of the big things that I'm quite interested in is looking at something called making every contact count. Making every contact count is an approach that the NHS are driving forward, and that refers to the idea that health professionals have millions of interactions with the public and patients every day, and it's looking to see how health professionals in those consultations could encourage people to be more active, to think about the diet, to give up smoking, to think about the way in which they live their lives, because there's so many of those contacts, and that's the best way, if you like, or one of the best ways of reaching everybody in the population. Sounds really simple, but the complexities of that are actually quite substantial. So I'm kind of quite interested in looking at ways in which we could train health professionals to be able to deliver healthy lifestyle messages routinely within every consultation that they do. So if you think about, let's take general practice or GPs, most of us will go and see our GP within a 2-year period. So that's a great way, isn't it, of being able to routinely, constantly give the public really important messages about their lifestyle. So that's kind of quite a big piece of work that we're doing. And alongside that, we're doing some work on a topic called what we've called snacktivity. So it's ironic that I should be talking about snacks and snacktivity, but snacktivity is about encouraging the public to take snacks of activity. So rather than telling or the public taking snacks of food, we're asking them to take snacks of physical activity. So that's short bouts of physical activity throughout the whole day. So it's a bit of a play on words, because we spend our whole lives thinking about snacks. You can snack as much as you like, just not on food. You've got to do it on physical activity. And we hope that that will be a new approach to helping the public to be more active, because we hope that if you break it down into small snacks of physical activity, the public will feel more able to achieve that, because it's smaller, you don't need equipment, you don't need to change your clothes. And that way you might be able to accumulate more activity and snacks throughout your whole day. And it should mean that you sit less, you're more active. So that's going to be a programme of work over 5 years. And that, again, is funded by the Department of Health and Social Care, who figured that it's worth exploring the snacktivity concept with the public to see whether that can get people more active.
So do you think these kind of topics, for future aspiring scientists, say in 10 years, do you think these kind of topics will still be being explored? Or do you think, as we progress with technology, self-driving vehicles and everything, do you think the field might change slightly in terms of what people are studying?
Yeah, so we are seeing a shift. So one of the key shifts that we're seeing is the use of technology in physical activity, and that wasn't something that we used to do or think about, a few years ago. As times have changed and things have changed, we are looking much more in the future, and we're trying to second guess technology a little bit to see how technology might help us to help people be more physically active and to think about their diet. So I think technology would be a good example of how we are trying to do that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Everybody seems to have a Fitbit nowadays and all those kinds of things. So yeah, I imagine it's going to be a hot topic for future scientists. Other than seeing the topics change, how else would you like to see your field change and academia as a whole? It could be in terms of practices, work ethic, inclusivity, diversity. Just curious to see what other changes you think should happen.
In terms of the way in which we work, I think the way in which we work is pretty good, actually. We're allowed to be flexible. We're allowed to think about the way in which we conduct our research and the topics. I think one of the key things that I would like to see, certainly in my academic career, is more time spent on helping people to engage with each other. So collaborating much more. I think we're still doing too much on our own. I think we could create and produce so much more as scientists and as academics if we got together just a little bit more, because we can generate more together than we can on our own. And I think historically academia has been quite singular. That's often how we've gone about our work. Often we can be in competition with other scientists or with other academics. So I'd like us to have a different mindset and to say, okay, how can we create more by working together than working apart? I think things have changed in terms of collaboration. I think there is a greater emphasis. on us working together. I don't mean just at Loughborough, but across the world. I know it's difficult at the moment, but I think, yeah, cooperation and collaboration it's got to be at the forefront of science going forward.
And what are your thoughts on diversity in science at the moment and improving that?
That's a big question. I think, I think historically there hasn't been enough diversity in science. I think it has been quite a male, a white culture in terms of science. I think Loughborough has been excellent in trying to change some of that in terms of the policies and procedures that are in place, and really trying to encourage people from minority groups to come and work at Loughborough. So I think it is changing. I don't think it's changing quick enough. I think we need to do more. We need to think about the balance between different groups of people in science. But as long as we acknowledge and recognise it, I think we've got a chance of doing something about it. I think I'll be more worried if we were pretending that everything was okay. We're not. We've said this is not okay, and it's not the way in which we want to see science, whether that's at Loughborough or the universities. So I think that's definitely the first step forward. I think some people are frustrated at the pace or the lack of pace of change. But my view is, as long as we're moving forward, then that's always a good thing.
Is there anything you wish your younger self had been told, or have you got any advice for kind of young scientists aspiring to get into fields like yours?
Gosh, I suppose my advice would be not to listen to advice. But if I have to listen to advice, or if I have to give some advice, I think it would be to get some good mentors, to get good people around you, and not to be afraid of asking people to be your mentor, to guide you through the process. I think there has been a reluctance for people to reach out to others to help and guide you. And I think that's really important in terms of capacity building and helping, young budding scientists to really develop their skills. So I think I probably should have got some mentors earlier in my career. I think that would have made a big difference. I still have mentors now. I mean, lots of professors don't. That's not a view that I take. I think as a scientist, you always need a critical friend that you can turn to, whether you're an early career or you're a professor, that can say to you, like, that idea is crazy. It's never going to work. But equally, somebody else or another scientist to say to you, wow, that's an excellent idea. I really encourage you to take that idea forward and see where it takes you. So be open to mentorship. I think, again, there's this sort of sense that we should know it all in science, that we should know the answers, and I'm not quite sure why we think we should know all the answers, because nobody knows all the answers. So yeah, be open to a critical friend to guide you.
And would you say being open is a theme you should carry across different areas as a scientist? Because I know, obviously, you mentioned that your A-level choices weren't really connected to where you are today. Was that just being open to possibilities and different things that were presented to you? Because I think a lot of people worry that the decisions they make at A-levels or going to university, that's setting them on a certain road.
Yeah, I mean, I think my view is that you go to university for a broader education, a broader experience, and whatever you do there doesn't have to determine what you do later on. I think if you're building skills and you're building kind of a scientific inquiry and a scientific mind, you can apply those skills to whatever you might end up doing in the end. But I also think you have to grab those opportunities when they come your way. So just because, you might have done engineering to begin with, that doesn't mean that you couldn't do sports science. There's a huge part of engineering is, fed into sports science and vice versa. So it's kind of keeping an open mind to opportunities that might come, and not define yourself too early, because you can do whatever it is that you want to do. It's just making sure that you've got those good skills.
So we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but say for early career researchers that think my research could potentially be quite controversial and divide public opinion? I know you said about, kind of not taking it personally, don't engage, but when you're trying to find your feet in the field, is there any kind of specific advice for people that are in that position?
Yeah, so I think, that's a good example of an important time to find a mentor who can guide you, who can help you think about that kind of controversial topic, and also potentially could help you, deal with the media and how to approach questions if your research is controversial. One of the things that I always sort of tell people, because I get asked this question quite a bit actually, and one of the things that I say, or one of the ways in which I respond, is that lots of things in life are controversial. So my research is about health and medicine, and so there are lots of things in those domains that were hugely controversial, but yet have had great outcomes. So chemotherapy was hugely controversial when it was first developed. People couldn't understand why you would give people toxins or poisons to make them better. But could you imagine a world now without chemotherapy? Could you imagine all those people that would have died if those doctors had stopped developing chemotherapy because people felt that they were doing the wrong thing? IVF, hugely controversial. Could you imagine the lives of those kids that didn't have IVF, or donor transplants? That's another hugely controversial. So how many more lives would have been lost? So I think sometimes you've got to stick to your guns, and you've got to kind of accept that, yeah, it is a controversial topic, but there's a reason. It's not just controversial for the sake of it, that the output is for the greater good, and that's an important output.
No, I think that's a really, really good way to look at it. It's stepping outside of the box, isn't it? And it's making yourself uncomfortable in the hope that it brings about some positive change and progresses onwards. And no, I think that's great. So why should people consider a career in health sciences?
I think health sciences is, I guess I've sort of touched on this earlier, hugely rewarding. You've got an opportunity to make a real difference to everybody, and to save lives. And I think it's very flexible. You meet some great people, learn a lot. I've made some great friends along the way who have kind of been, quite inspirational, and very supportive. I think health sciences, because often the work that we do is very large, we tend to meet lots of people. So you quickly build a network of people that have similar interests to you. So opportunities for travel. So at the start, I talked about all the great places that I've managed to go to. I think health, because it's a global thing, does mean that you do get opportunities to travel and meet and look at other healthcare systems and other scientists working in health, which can be, can be really quite inspirational in terms of bringing back ideas.
And just a kind of last question, how would you describe being a scientist in 3 words?
Interesting, hard work, rewarding.
That's a good trio. Well, thank you so much for taking time to appear on the show and have a cuppa and a chat with us. And before we go, is there anything you want to plug or mention? Website, Twitter, anything like that?
I think our new research centre, which is called Climb at Loughborough, would be a good place to look at some of the different types of work that we're doing and some of the profiles of people that work with me on the work that I'm doing. I've done the podcast today, but there's a huge team of researchers around me that are doing the day-to-day stuff. So I think it'll be important to get a sense of, of them as well as me.
Definitely check it out then, listeners, if this is an area that you're interested in. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great. Thanks, Meg.
Thank you all for listening and watching Cuppa with a Scientist. We hope you found it interesting and will join us again. Do leave a comment and get in touch. We'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts on who you'd like to see on the show. And make sure you don't miss a show by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other mainstream podcast platforms. You can also subscribe to the Loughborough University YouTube channel if you prefer to watch the show. We hope you'll be back for more hot tea and even hotter stories to help you on your way to becoming a scientist.